We're going to be talking about a very emotional topic, as you can see here, endometriosis. Endometriosis. It's a very intense topic that I'm going to go over. I'm going to share some personal things with you, but I want you to understand that it's something very important that I want you guys to know, because there's a huge statistical growth of it going on continuously. More percentage of women are suffering every single year. So what I want to do is I want to kind of pull some references for you, talk about it, but I want to show you why it's important to have two perspectives. Now, once again, they're giving you opinion based on their thinking and their stuff that way. And I'm cool if you decide to go with that guidance and that advice. I think it's fantastic. There's consequences of benefit to both, okay? But they're all about treatment, cure, and all these terms that, as well as way, are not even allowed to say because I think they're ridiculous words, actually. So therefore, but here's what happens. There is always some things, some causal, not a cause, causal factors that can contribute to it. And so people in the world will say, well, it's more like prevention. Okay, if you want to use that word, but that's not even really true because you can't prevent everything. For example, I want everybody in the studio, which I know everybody in the studio, takes care of themselves, eats good, does everything that way. But if you walk outside and somebody comes driving through the parking lot extremely fast and hits you, it doesn't matter how well you're taking care of yourself, hits you with the car, you might break some bones, and you may need some drugs or surgery. That's fine, okay? But the idea of when you look at conditions of any kind, there's always things that can contribute to it. Well, what happens if those contributing things are lifestyle things? And you're gonna find out a lot of them are. That's why if you look at most research, they say that 95% of chronic illness is actually lifestyle related. So people like us are not sitting there trying to treat a disease. And I even think the natural world misleads people when they say, here's a natural treatment for this and things this. No, I'm sitting there going, hey, listen, there's always contributing factors to everything going wrong. Let's look at those, let's grab them, and then the chance of some things developing would be a lot less, okay? It's that simple. And so that's why, for example, if I talk about endometriosis, it's not medical advice because I'm not going to talk about pharmacology. I will show you pharmacologically what they do, okay? And they put it on their website. And I'm sitting there going, okay, I understand why they do it. And if you go in that perspective, I get it. But there can be a different perspective. So that's what we're going to talk about today, a different perspective when it comes to endometriosis. But let's take out Johns Hopkins. I think they got some pretty great things on their website. Let's take a look at it. So I just pulled this out. Now, if you want to go to Johns Hopkins medicine website, it's right there. It's under health. But let's take a look at what it talks about when it says what you need to know. And believe it or not, you're going to laugh about this. I agree with almost everything on their website. I actually take it back. I agree with everything on their website from their perspective. Okay, here we go. Endometriosis is derived from the word endometrium, which is the tissue that lines the uterus. Patients with endometriosis have endometrial type tissue outside of the uterus. Okay, come on back for me for a second. I'm going to show you, let's just pop this up again. Pop up the picture of the uterus. I know a uterus looks like an alien. It's kind of funny, actually, if you think about it and stuff. But if you look at that little triangle inside, and you can see that there's layers up there, that's called the endometrium, okay? And it actually produces every single month, and then when you menstruate, it exits, okay? So if we go back to here, let's keep going on. That you can see it starts to move outside the uterus. So it can get very large on the inside, but it can now spread into the pelvic cavity. It can even go up into the brain, and they found it. Now, is that very common? No, but it does happen. Here we go. Endometriosis affects an estimate 2 to 10% of American women between the ages of 25 and 40. That's statistically significant. That means if we have 350 million people, and let's say 100 million of them are between ages of 25 and 40, that means 2 to 10 million women suffer with this, okay? And statistically, it gets worse every year. Now, here we go. If it gets worse every year and they want to manage your end-stage condition, which that's medical care with pharmaceutical and drugs and surgery, if you choose to do that, that's you would take that advice, I'm fine. But there are contributing factors that do this. Let's keep going on. Let me show you. Women with endometriosis are more likely to have infertility or difficulty getting pregnant. This is where we're going to get emotional with you. This is why when I post about this and I watch some of the comments, I actually get downright angry sometimes. I really do. I really do. I get angry because not only the fact that I have massive personal experiences, not that I've ever had endometriosis, but we'll get into the story. But the idea is this, is then when people make comments, and sometimes I delete them because I'm sitting there going, you're extremely clueless on this, and if someone else reads that, it's a bad day. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to show you some of them that way. Here we go. Symptoms of endometriosis may include excessive menstrual cramps, abnormal or heavy menstrual flow, and pain during intercourse. Laparoscopy, a minimally invasive surgical procedure, can be used to definitively diagnose and treat endometriosis. All right? So once again, that's why one time I watched a comment. Let me give you an example. They'll say the only way that you can diagnose endometriosis is by surgery. I'm like, because then that could mislead some women. It could mislead them because it's not true. I'm going to show you on Johns Hopkins' website itself. But see, it's like, no, is it a very good way to diagnose it? Yes, it is. But a lot of women are extremely scared to go under the knife. And that's okay. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm saying, for example, that there are other things that they can do. And they will show you. They will tell you about that. So when I say, well, Doc, you're censoring somebody from erasing a comment. No, I'm saying the fact that I don't want to sit there and argue with you. And so I don't want to sit there and go, no, that's not true. And then they just get in a pissing match. You know, I tell people, arguing with dumb people is like getting a pissing match with a skunk. Nobody wins and you all stink. Do you understand? And it's like, so if you want to have a conversation and sit down, I'll get on the phone with you for free and talk about stuff, okay? So let's go on. All right, here we go. Endometriosis diagnosis, and here we go. This is the one thing I love about it. I had to pull it up right. Doctors may suspect endometriosis based on your history or physical exam and may use these tools to diagnose it. Laparoscopy, I totally agree. A biopsy, 100%. But look what it says right below it. How to diagnose endometriosis without surgery. And I agree with the first thing they say, and that's why I'm going to read this. There is no lab test, a procedure, or imaging that can be done to diagnose endometriosis without surgery, okay? So therefore, guess what happens? When you look at it as a whole, once again, when you're looking for a clear diagnosis, you may need to go in there. But there's things you can see as it says, however. See, however. So I understand I say the only thing you can do is surgery. That's not true. However, imaging studies can be useful to look at signs of endometriosis. Common diagnosis imaging includes what? Ultrasound, MRI, okay? To look at the organs, see if there's tissue growth on there. Now, once again, just like sometimes when people say, mammograms are this way, I'm like, no, if you want to look at certain things, you can do that, but there's other things you can do. So ultrasound and MRI, once again, are effective actually looking at certain things, okay, without having surgery. And then once you get diagnosed, and let's say you did have laparoscopy and get some diagnosis from it that way, now you can monitor it and don't have to go into surgery all the time. That's what someone says. The only way you can know if it goes away is surgery. I'm like, that's not really true. There's other ways of seeing that. Now, if you want a definitive thing to know us, guess what happens? Well, then go in and do the surgery. But there's a lot of people that are against it, not from a standpoint that they wouldn't do it if they didn't have to, but they're just not going to run to it all the time. So there are other tools that can do that, okay? So you just got to look into this. Now, why is this so personal for me? This issue is very personal because as you saw just from the beginning, it is very common for women to suffer from infertility when they go through this. And so therefore, if I did not dig deep on this whole issue, this would not exist right here. This would not exist. This would not exist. I would not have 4 daughters. So yes, do I have emotion? Do I have passion? Do I have things behind this? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because Christy was diagnosed with this before I knew her and stuff. And so therefore, you're right. And the doctors gave her their opinion that, listen, because it's so bad, you are not going to have kids. And you say, Doc, did you disagree with that assessment, diagnosis, and advice? No, I didn't. You say, wait, now you're confusing me, Doc. Well, no. I'm not confusing you. You're thinking the way that doctor did. And with the current things that they do for women, guess what happens? If they follow that path, guess what happens? That advice could be exact and spot on. But if you maybe look at it a little differently, maybe start looking upstream, what are some of the contributing factors to it? And maybe if you could change those, could it maybe change the insides? And see, that's the whole point. See, and I tell people this, I want to be very clear on this. 99.97%, and I'm making that stat up, I can't really tell you if that's really true, but I guarantee I'm darn close, of people that ever come to a wellness way or see any of my docs or nurses or anything that way have already been through so much stuff before they get to us. Do you see? They've had failure after failure after failure with no progress, and they say, I'm willing to try anything. You see? And then we tell them, I say, listen, be difficult, here's what you need to do, all these things, and we can go for those other causal factors. So what can be some of those causal factors that contribute to it? Well, let's take a look. I want to just pull out, once again, I love pulling out their words and their research, and let's kind of go through it in a little bit. But just once again, here's a recent study we talked about on endometriosis, and let's kind of define it and let's walk through it a little bit. So we take the abstract and stuff like that. No, once again, you can download and pay for the whole research article if you want, but I'm just going to do some highlights. But let's go right here. Endometriosis is a chronic estrogen-dependent chronic condition characterized by the ectopic inflammation of functional tissue lining the uterus outside of the uterus cavity. Okay, let's stop right there. Stop right there. Okay, right there. Here we go. If you think about chronic, that means there's long-term standing problems, estrogen-dependent chronic condition. So, simple factor. If you have elevated abnormal estrogens, could it be a contributing factor to it? So not a disease, don't worry about disease, but just normal levels of estrogens. Could that have a contributing factor to it? And it's predominantly yes. It's probably one of the biggest factors. Now, here's the thing, and this is where you have to keep on going upstream. I love this example. You know, I think that's why I love RFK so much, because before he even got into politics, he was an environmental lawyer. And if you live by the Great Lakes, and if you said this, and there's the Fox River that feeds into the Great Lakes, and I get kind of worried when I actually see a bunch of fishermen out there. I'm like, I hope that they're just catch and releasing, because they've studied the fish that have come out of Fox River. I'm surprised they don't glow, okay? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of crazy. And therefore, it's very toxic. You don't want to swim in it. It's just bleh, okay? But here's the point. But that feeds out into Lake Michigan, okay, into the bay. You know, I know people always correct me. Lake Michigan is part of the bay. You know what I'm saying? So if I were at Green Bay, say, it's the bay. It's Lake Michigan, all right? And so here we go. So Lake Michigan. Now, let's say, and I'm more of an environmentalist too, okay? Well, let's say that you said, I'm gonna raise money for a machine, and we're gonna go into the bay, and we're gonna clean up all the toxic stuff, and we're gonna make it better for the fish. Believe it or not, I'd contribute money to that. I truly would. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a great thing. I think that's honorable. I think that that person cares about clean water. I absolutely love that idea. I'm not joking. I would actually physically give money to that kind of cause. But I would also say, but if you understand all the stuff they're dumping into the river for the last 100 years with all the paper mills and all stuff like this, and if you go upstream where the paper mills and all the companies are that were dumping toxic waste into the river and it's going to the bay, I'm all about cleaning up the end stage that way. But here's what happens. Do you really think if the river is not cleaned up that the bay is going to get any better? See, so that's why when people look at the bay, endometriosis, here's where we're going. I have no problem if you manage what's going on and try to do things that way. But I'm sitting there going, if you don't stop toxifying the river, you can go upstream. So if you look at the estrogen dominance and the contributing factors, but then you have to go up a little farther upstream. What are the things that are throwing it off? What are making the estrogens go bad? What is throwing them levels off to be too high and stuff like that? Well, we're going to get into that. See, that's why when people say, oh, you're speaking about medical stuff. No, I'm not, because I'm going to show you, and I have to know what they're managing stuff that way from a standpoint of, and people say, well, doc, should I get off all the things you're putting me in? That's not my advice. I'd never give you that. I'm not going to contribute to that. I'm going to go upstream. You know what I'm saying? And look at all the contributing factors to it. But let's go on. Here we go. Endometriosis is derived from the word Greek endo, inside, metra, uterus, and osis, disease. Remains to some extent vague, with a more common clinical symptoms between pelvic pain and infertility. Most frequently, endometrial tissue is found in the ovaries, resulting in the formation of chocolate cyst. Yes, that's actually a term. Still, it can also be found in the fallopian tubes, uterosacral, ligaments, gastrointestinal tract, and less often pleura, perineum, and central nervous system. Yeah, the brain, guys. This activity illustrates the evaluation and treatment of endometriosis and reviews the role of healthcare team in managing patients afflicted with endometriosis. Come back to me on this, Tom. Do you understand management of endometriosis? See, think about it this way. That's when you look at medical thinking. See, I say they're talking about how to manage the disease process, and that's why it doesn't go away, and that's why you're always on medications, and that's why there's always things going on. And so therefore, Christy was all through that all the time. She was. And actually some of the therapies they gave her made her sicker, made her worse. And so I said, let's start going upstream on these things to see what some of those contributing factors are. So let's go on, let's take a look. The role of steroid hormones, ladies, your hormones, is the pathogenesis of endometriosis is also indisputable. the hormonal component is indisputable. 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 I'm using their medical terms on their medical research. Here we go. Estrogen is the main hormone responsible for the propagation and expansion of endometrium. The increased action of aromatase, mainly in the deep infiltrating endometriosis, leads to local increased estrogen activities. Okay? So what they're saying is this: not only can there be factors that throw off our hormones, but then you can do internal things that even aromatase it farther. You understand? And there is a contributing factor to that even in the realm of high glucose. When was the last time that a doctor said, hey, young lady, you've been diagnosed with endometriosis, we got to change your diet. We got to pull away all that sugar from you that way. Let's keep going on. On the other hand, the inability of progesterone to have an antagonist action with estrogen and endometrial tissue is a determining factor for establishing endometriosis. Come back to me. So estrogens can cause that tissue to grow because that's its job. There's an estrogen do a wonderful job of anabolically growing things. Progesterone says, put on the brakes, put on the brakes. So even if your estrogens were elevated, the progesterone can say, hey, listen, I'm going to elevate to kind of counteract it. But you could have normal estrogens and low progesterone, and there's no balance to that activity. Now, as you guys know, what are some things can throw off your progesterone? Ladies, can mental stress do it? Yeah. Can actually toxic food and bad things and stuff you're doing in your body on a regular basis? Yes. For all my fitness friend ladies, can exercising a little too hard, pushing your body a little too hard, not getting good sleep, could that affect your progesterone levels? Yes or yes? I know, and all my ladies in here are like going, and that's why I'm yelling at them going, and I'm yelling, I'm like, it's out of deep caring for them. Hey, listen, you gotta work out certain times during your cycle, otherwise you're gonna push it. And ladies, you guys know this, it can disrupt your cycle. And now remember, ladies, I'm very clear about this. And when we have more of our fitness month that way, what's going to happen is Dana and Luke and Travis are going to give you great things so you can do certain things every day of the month, every single day, okay? So movement is very important. But for women, movement certain ways are very important during different times of the weeks based on where your hormone levels are at. So that's what we're going to make sure you have that in great detail. So that being said, when you look at these things, there's multiple contributing factors. But I'm going to go to the next one, and let's take a look at another article. Here we go. Endometriosis. Pelvic endometriosis is a complex syndrome characterized by the what? I even highlighted for you. Estrogen-dependent chronic inflammatory process that affects the pelvic tissue, including the ovaries. So let me ask you a question. If you think about this, let's take a look. More of a statement. There is a hormonal contribution. That's why if you think about it this way, and let's look at what John Hopkins talked about, in the same, scroll down a little farther on the website, most common treatments for endometriosis that do not require surgery are hormone therapy and pain management. Endometrial tissues are affected by hormones in the same way as endometrial tissue inside the uterus. Hormonal changes can occur with the menstrual cycle, can make endometriosis painful worse. Treatments that include hormone therapy can alter hormone levels or stop your body from producing certain hormones. Hormone therapy can affect your ability to get pregnant, so it may not be right for everyone. Now look what they're doing. Birth control, progesterones, GRH antagonists and agonists, and so pain medications, non-steroidal inflammatories. See, what happens is this. Everything trying to manipulate things to try to manage it. And then if you ask your doctor, and I actually don't disagree with him when he says this, because if you take that advice, I would say listen to that advice all the way. And like he'll say, well, you'll say to the person, well, when will I be able to stop it? And they're like, well, probably not until you hit menopause, or you have some your ovaries and uterus removed and things like that, and you have to stay on it till then. And there's some people that are going to choose to do that. I'm cool with that. If you want that medical advice, great. Now, if you're sitting there going, but I don't want to do that. And there's some doctors say you have no choice. And now there's the different perspective. You say, because the question is going, okay, doc, where are my estrogen levels at and what's going on with them? And see, this is the part that frustrated me the most. Because what ended up happening in Christy's situation was the fact that I said, listen, let's take a look at the estrogens that are contributing to the factor of what's going on. And she had nothing, zero, nilch. She had very few things tested properly to see where it was at. And the prognosis that they gave her was not good. Now, are you saying the doctor was wrong? No. If she would have listened to that perspective, she probably would have done everything they said as far as no kids, cancer's down the road, you got to have all your organs removed, stuff like that. And that was their advice. That was their opinion. So she decided to get a different opinion. And going to a different doctor that has the same education is going to give you the same opinion. Look, I got a second opinion, same thing. Okay, you may need a different perspective, but if you want that management medical advice, that's cool. But there's always a different perspective on things that way. And Durham, have I had women come in with their laparoscopy and their labs and things like that, and they put them in front of me, and I'm like going, holy mackerel. You should still work on your hormones, but you may need to have that surgery. You may need to have the surgery, you understand? And because it's just so bad. So is there a point where people get too bad? Absolutely. Sometimes because they're holding on to the current device they're getting, that it progresses even worse. See, just by doing the things that you see on Johns Hopkins doesn't mean it's not going to progress. It may progress slower, but sometimes it progresses just as fast. But the one major driving factor that I want to look at today, and it's not the only one, is actually estradiol, which is a pretty predominantly high when it comes to females in their cyclic years. So let's take a look. Estradiol, the main driver. Estradiol is the key estrogen contributing to the growth and inflammation of endometrial lesions. It promotes cell proliferation, more tissue growth, inflammatory responses, increased pain and immune activations, resistance to cell death, make it endometrial tissue stubborn and persistent and keep on growing, okay? Now, once again, is it the only estrogen that contributes to it? No, they all have it, but there are estrogens that are actually a little bit more protective, and there are the ones that can actually increase it and increase the DNA damage and even make it worse. But here's what happens. What you're going to notice is there is usually a domination of estrogens. That's why you've heard the term estrogen dominant, okay? Now, can you have other hormones that can contribute to it? Absolutely. But it's very common to actually have your estrogens abnormal to get there. So here's what I want you to think about this. What is one of the ways that you can have hormones produced, and then if they don't actually convert to different forms and they get too elevated, so I say what makes estrogen dominance? Durham, you can have a tumor. You can have a tumor and you're just producing massive amounts. That's not the commonality. That's a very small percentage. I want you to think about hormones like a big old tub, okay? And what happens is this. You think there's a spout coming in all the time, and it fluctuates through the month, but then what happens is you have the drains. And sometimes the drains aren't working. And so therefore the tub continues to fill. That's what I want you to think about with estrogen dominance. So what we want to do is we want to open up those plugs and start moving the estrogens to different forms and move out of the body. Well, how is that done? Well, I'm going to show you a step-by-step how to metabolize your estradiol and excrete it. Think about this. Now, everything I'm going to give you is the upstream things. Because once again, if your hormones are abnormal, you're going to end up in a situation to where you're going to need to see what's going on, how to metabolize them, how to actually move them through. And it's just normal physiological biochemical things. So let's take a look at this woman right here. She came in with endometriosis. As you can see, this is just a Dutch test. And you can see that over to the right, you can see that the three primary estrogens, E1, E2, and E3, it's like a gas gauge. They're really high and they're elevated. And then you can kind of see it's going to convert down to 16-hydroxy, and that's really elevated. But then the rest of them are kind of normal. Now, the one thing is this. I want you to, and Tom, keep this up there as I'm talking because I want them to think about this. I want you to think about that estrone, estradiol, and estradiol has to convert and go from A to B, B to C, and C to D so it can be eliminated. Well, if you see, some of the stages are actually not doing that, okay? Now, once again, if we take a look, how does that happen? Well, what I'm going to do is going to show you some of those steps and what happens with that. So if we come back, let's talk about this. Here's the basic things that happen with hormones. Hormones are produced. Now, how are they produced? The vast majority in the cyclic years, which is where endometriosis is the biggest concern, during the cyclic years, your brain releases some hormones, it's called FSH and LH, and once again, tells the ovaries to grow a follicle, and hormones are released and they circulate through the blood. And then what happens is they go to other organ systems to change them, aka metabolize them, to different estrogens for great function, but then also metabolize them even further to make sure that they're eliminated. So those are the drains. So therefore, if you are deficient in certain things to metabolize and convert them, remember, think about going from A to B, B to C. There's specific bioactive ingredients and enzymes and everything that exist in there to actually move them along. And you know what's really cool? They're all nutrient dependent. Let me say it again. They're not drug dependent, they're nutrient dependent. So that's why our perspective is saying, listen, can we see if those pathways are some deficiencies there? And if we do, can we support them and then retest them and see the progress come about? Sure. Has nothing to do with medical advice and actually managing their condition and doing like, no. We're gonna go after some of those causal factors that can contribute to Lake Michigan being poisoned by the Fox River. So let's take a look. And once again, when you see this, take a picture. Because here's what happens. The major organ this happens in is in the liver. And there's a phase 1 and phase 2. And it's so cool. I'm obsessed with this like crazy. And I can tell you, Chrissy's liver health was absolutely horrible when I first met her. Absolutely horrible. And she could not metabolize and convert them. And as Morgan, our friend here, Morgan takes a picture, I love that she did that. Take a picture of this in your camera because I want you to study this because then you can understand why we sometimes give you the things we do which are nutrient dependent and things you can understand this. See, that's one thing I love about physiology and biochemistry. You can see this stuff and go, oh, it makes so much darn sense. So here we go. The actions start in the liver where estradiol transforms into more water-soluble forms to be excreted. All right, come back. Why does it have to move it into more of a water-soluble form? Because hormones are very, very potent. And if that hormone actually is not moved into a weaker form and gets into the GI, it can cause those cells to metabolize and grow, and it can cause other cancers. See, the hormones are very potent. They will tell tissues what to do. So you want estrogens, you want estradiol, you want 16-hydroxyestradiol and estrone to actually be at a normal level during certain cyclic times so that endometrium can grow normally so you can implant, once again, a fertilized egg on there to have kids. But if it gets too thick, do you understand? Can't implant on, so you could even fertilize the egg properly, but the uterine lining is bad. So you want good, strong hormones. But then as they're supposed to be eliminated, you want them weak, so it doesn't tell our tissues to do that stuff too. They can be very bad. It can cause the internal lining of the intestinal tract to grow too fast, and you can end up with some cancers there. So that's why you want them more in a weaker water-soluble form. So let's go back. See, and this is basic liver physiology. Phase 1, hydroxylation. Estradiol is converted into 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 16-hydroxyestrone. And as you can see, they're converted, once again, less estrogenic, even protective. Whoa, hold the phone. So there's estrogens that are protective. But if you look at breast cancer therapy and medical advice, they fear you of all estrogens, and when they give you aromatase inhibitors, they're stopping all of them, even the protective ones. Does that make sense? Now let's go back to it. But if 4-hydroxy gets too high, it can be harmful. It makes DNA damage. It can lead to cancer. 16-hydroxy, oh, it's so potent. 16-hydroxyestrone, so potent high and bad and cause some things. But let's take a look. E1, E2, E3 is high, and look at the one red there, 16-hydroxy is high. This woman is suffering like crazy. She's producing tissue like crazy. This woman has been through multiple surgeries. Now let's come back here. Come back here. Do you understand? She came in because she went through 2 surgeries. And she came to me and said, Doc, I don't want to have another surgery. And she showed me her imaging, and it was thick and thick again. I'm like, I want you to go back to the doctor. I'm going to do my thing. But I'm telling you right now, that's pretty thick. I think you need to go in another surgery. I'm not going to tell you to, it's not my advice, but it's pretty thick. You have a lot of tissue in there. And she went and did it. The surgeons did an amazing job. And guess what happened? Now, Bethany has her first ever baby. Do you understand? And I got hundreds of examples like that. But even, like I said, I kind of agree with you, Doc. You're going to need another surgery and stuff. See, I'm not against surgeries, not against drugs and things like that. But her estrogens were so bad and things like that. It was crazy. Now, for you guys, I do have written permission to talk about her. A lot of people know her. Actually, I think she's coming to visit. She doesn't even live in the state and stuff. Now, here's some other labs of other people if we take a look. If you look here, oh, look at that estradiol. You don't want it, even during mid-cycle when the ovulation is, you don't want it above 350, 357. See, but look at the estradiol, 752. Oh, and look at her progesterone, it's tanked out. So the gas is going like crazy, and the brake is, you're just going down a mountain with no brakes. It's kind of sad. And see, the vast majority of this happens, the changes in the liver. And that's why, so doc, can bad food change the function of the liver? Yes, it can. Can high stress? Yep. Can other poisons and toxins? Yep. Can too much sugar and non-alcoholic fatty liver? Yep. Can alcohol and fatty liver? Yep. See, there's so many contributing factors of why the hormones, once again, and this is just basic. Now you say, doc, there's nutrients needed for all these pathways and all these phases to work. Yep, it's listed next. So I'm going to show you, when we talked about those pathways, on how to support them. Now, let me say this. The first thing you need to do is actually get labs. You do. But there's a lot of people out there that can't afford labs. I understand that. I am empathetic to that. I really am. I really am. We are working on our own lab that will be very CLIA certified, okay? And what are we doing our own lab for? Cost effectiveness? Really honestly, I think healthcare costs have gone crazy. It really does. I think, and I'm hoping that RFK can make some good changes in there. I'm hoping that there can be some things that are better for the public, and we'll see what happens, okay? But as you can see here, once again, you can see these things and support these pathways if you have labs done and be very detailed to it that way. So let's take a look on how to support these phase 1 and phase 2. So you can take that estrogen, which is a fat cell molecule, and convert it into water soluble and remove it. And you can look it to the right. Do you understand that you can get it out by the sweat, the bowels, the urine? Wait, so does your liver work better if you move and sweat? Do you understand? So exercise for women is extremely important to keep normal hormone balance. But let's go on. So here we go. Here's some great things. They all have different effects. I put this up there, and we're going to talk about each one of them. Tom, keep it up there for me. And once again, take the pictures, look at these things. Now, if you do have labs, you can be even more specific about what a person needs. But these either enhance liver detox pathways or directly influence estrogen metabolism. Number 1, DIM. Okay, come back to me. I need to talk to my carnivore friends. Okay, I need to talk to my carnivore friends on this. I think that an animal-based product is so good for you in so many ways. But you know something? I even have a staff member that doesn't eat animals. And she does a wonderful job with her plant-based stuff. Okay? And she's doing well. Now, do I favor animal products? Yes, by far. I'm going to do a clip on TikTok and Instagram where they studied same grams and everything of organic beef and then a decent veggie burger. And for muscle protein synthesis, it took double the amount to finally get the response compared to a smaller amount of ground beef. Okay, so I'm more in favor of animals just based on research. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it with plant. It's just much more difficult. Now see, you're saying, oh, my carnivore friends are loving that study. But my carnivore friends, this is why I am obsessed with cruciferous and other plants, because of the bioactive components that support estrogen metabolism. And 2 out of 10% of all the women are suffering with this. And so I can't get them away from broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and kale and things like that. Why? Because I see the components we need for liver process. So let's take a look. DIM, found in cruciferous. It boosts 2-hydroxy pathway, reducing the damaging 4 and 16. It's very effective in estrogen dominance, PMS. Now remember, this is basic research. Turmeric moderates estrogen pathways and supports liver detox and the anti-inflammatory, bonus endometriosis. Green tea, the EGCG, that's why I love green tea. Supports liver detoxing, CUMP, one of the genetic factors. There we go. Milk thistle, I love this. Increases glutathione, liver mass reaction. Critical in phase 2 detox and neutralizes estrogen metabolites. Enzymes, once again, help with conjugation and clearance of estrogen and toxins. See, so if you just look at some of the things up there, these are well-documented, well-researched things that help the enzymes that are nutrient-dependent. And when you have a lab, you can kind of match these up. See, that's why it's like, for example, what people do, they're just going to go get DIM, turmeric, green tea, and milk thistle. Yeah, but maybe you don't need green tea. Maybe you don't need turmeric. So therefore, that's why when people start to throw all things out, well, then people say, Doc, DIM is good for the liver. Okay, what pathway? See, that's the detail that we get here. That's the detail that my doctors, my nurses, my academy, all the things are taught regularly. See, that's the detail that people need when they go upstream. But wait, there's more. Key nutrients. My carnivore friends will love this. They support liver function, methylation, and detox. B vitamins. Okay? Best source of B vitamins? Meat. Meat. Animal meat. Okay? Supports methylation. Number 2, magnesium. A lot of enzymatic processes. Number 3, calcium deglutarate. It binds to it and pulls it out. And you can usually see on a stool test if your beta-glucuronidase, yes, I'm being all doctorish for you right now, actually starts to elevate. You could actually even get the estrogens to the GI and it recirculates and absorbs. And that can create some estrogen dominance. Here we go. Number 4, selenium and zinc. They're supportive in reducing oxidative stress and other factors in the liver for estrogen metabolism. Once again, that's the great detail of supporting normal liver function. That is not estrogen, endometriosis, medical advice, domination, and management and stuff like that. It's the upstanding carpenter viewpoint to say, listen, we need to support the liver so the body can do what it needs to do with its estrogens to keep the metabolism, keep the balance to it, because it's a contributing factor why you have endometriosis in the first place. And so I started to do that with Christy's body. Saw her labs, saw things that didn't detail. And as we start to go upstream and change all those contributing factors, her diagnostic criteria got better. Who said so? They did. And the cool thing is this, and therefore the uterus started to go back to a normal level. And so therefore, that's why this is so personal for me. So when I watch these pages saying, well, that's why he's trying to do natural treatment for everything. No, it's not. It never has and it never will. That would be against what I believe in premises. And if one of my offices did do something like that, I'd kick them out. I'd get rid of them because it's not what we're based on and what we do. If you want to be a natural treatment, go join some other group that way and stuff like that. Now, that being said, here's some basic steps. Get tested. Some of that aromatase decreases sugar intake. High fiber binds to it. Avoid things that bring estrogens into your system. Man, I wish that there was a challenge that we could detox and untoxify the house and the things and the, oh wait, there is, okay? Avoid xenoestrogens, plastic, pesticides, fragrances. There's so many things that are listed as xenoestrogens. Stay hydrated for kidney function. And for all my fitness friends, Morgan, regular exercise and sweating helps move the liver and detox it. So once I talk about women saying, I'm just concerned about you pushing a little too hard, I'm more concerned about your progesterone, the brake. I want you to have good estrogens. I just don't want them to go out of level, because then there could be some metabolic things that could be damaging to all you beautiful women's wonderful bodies.